The case you are about to see and the characters in it are fictional. The procedure, however, is legally accurate. The characters are played by actors, but the jury is selected from members of the general public. In court today, Annette Sanderson, a former researcher on the radio program called Harte, is being sued for libel by the program's producer, Jean Fraser Allardyce. The substance of the alleged libel is contained in a short story written by the defendant. She does not deny authorship, nor that the allegations are defamatory, but claims in her defense that everything she wrote is true.
Miss Sanderson, when did you first meet the plaintiff?
In June 1975. Mrs. Allardyce, she was Jean Fraser then, used to talk to me when I brought studio participants or guests into the hospitality lounge of General Radio Communications, the independent radio company. We seemed to get on very well together, and she promised to find me a more interesting job working as a researcher on one of her programs.
Now, in June 1975, would it be true to say that General Radio Communications had, temporarily at least, closed its doors to new researchers?
They said there were enough researchers already.
Now, how was the plaintiff able to circumvent this closed-door attitude?
She charmed the pants off the personnel manager.
Miss Sanderson, when you say the plaintiff charmed the pants off the personnel manager, do you mean just that? I mean, since this allegation is one of those in your story which is defamatory, you must be precise. Are you alleging that the plaintiff seduced the personnel manager in order to gain your appointment?
Yes.
I see, yes. Mr. O'Connor?
Thank you, my lord. Miss Sanderson, what are your grounds for believing that a seduction took place?
Jean told me that what she had done and what she had promised Ned Varling, the personnel manager, was quite enough to make him cave in at the knees.
Now, let's be quite clear about this. Are you saying that the plaintiff told you that she'd had sexual intercourse with Mr. Varling in order to gain what she wanted?
Not sexual intercourse, but sexual intimacy.
Yes. Yes, I see.
And you worked in total amity with Miss Fraser for how long?
Well over a year.
Which brings us to August of 1976, which time you entered Miss Fraser's household. Why was that?
I'd been renting a very unsatisfactory flat. I told Jean I couldn't stand it much longer, and she offered me rooms in her place. I had my 2 rooms and my own bathroom.
For a rent of how much?
£10 a week.
£10 a week for a bedroom, a sitting room and a bathroom, and the run of the rest of the house as much as you pleased? Well, was this not generous?
There was a reason for her generosity. She wanted a personal secretary, a general maid, a girl Friday, Saturday and every day. And that is what I became.
And you carried out these various duties in addition to your full-time work with General Radio Communication?
For almost 18 months.
Almost 18 months. Which time you must have become indispensable to Miss Fraser. Now, when did the new program come about?
Harte to Harte? In September 1976.
And who originated the idea for this new program?
I did.
And you discussed your idea with Miss Fraser?
Yes. She thought it was a marvelous idea. Just the thing I need for a change of image, she said.
And how was that change of image effected?
Jean invited the managing director, Mr. Eddie Wilbraham, round for dinner one evening. I cooked and served the food and wine, and Jean chatted him up.
Chatted him up? Well, what form did this take? Are you saying it was a sort of platonic evening?
No. Between a man and a woman at a certain stage in their relationship, no words have to be spoken. The atmosphere is charged with sexual promise.
Was this promise fulfilled?
On at least 4 subsequent occasions, I saw Eddie leaving Jean's bedroom well after midnight.
Now, how did you see this?
From the drawing room downstairs, I was able to see anyone entering or leaving her bedroom.
Yes, but how could you be absolutely sure that it was Mr. Wilbraham who you saw leaving Miss Fraser's bedroom at midnight on at least 4 occasions?
Because he came and talked with me afterwards.
Came and talked to you? Why would he do that?
Because he quite fancied me. But he used to make awful jokes about Jean having worn him out.
Now, Miss Sanderson, you've now reached a point when the new program, Harte to Harte, willingly sanctioned, indeed gratefully sanctioned by Mr. Wilbraham, have been sold to a local independent radio station. When did it begin to attract the attention of the major independent radio companies?
Less than a year after we initiated it.
And how did that interest come about?
Well, We decided after a great deal of research and heart-searching to do a two-part program on the subject of male and female homosexuality. The day after program 1 went out on a local station, there was an enormous response from the national press, and a major company asked to hear the recording of program 2, which was to deal with the subject of lesbianism, in a view to arranging a simultaneous networking of the program. The effect was so enormous that it even affected the television ratings the day it was broadcast.
Oh, this must have been exciting and gratifying for you.
It was the breakthrough we'd been hoping for.
And did this program on the subject of lesbianism, did that go out by the major network companies?
Yes.
And was it a success?
A huge success. For that program, I'd also taken great pains over the research. I'd found 2 solo lesbians and also a pair living together. Jean had met them several times. We had many major discussions.
And was this lesbian couple used on the program?
On the day of the recording, Jean very suddenly asked me to go to Carlisle to find some people to set up for a further program. I didn't want to go, of course, not that day. I came back the next day and I heard the show in Jean's office. She was there.
And it was a great success.
It was a complete fraud. Jean had decided that the couple that I had chosen weren't appealing or articulate enough to scoop the ratings, so she paid them off and rehearsed a pair of unknown, heterosexual and talented actresses. And that is why the show hit the top.
Yet you continued in Miss Fraser's employment. Now, how do you equate this with your conclusion that your friend and employer was guilty of an appalling fraud?
Because she was my friend, because I loved her and admired her ability. I couldn't see it wrecked when she'd come so far.
Miss Sanderson, in your story, which has given rise to this action, you make certain allegations about the plaintiff's professional autobiography, entitled, like her successful radio program, Harte to Harte. Now, how was the subject of this autobiography first broached?
Jean was approached by the editor of a good publishing house to write such a book. She was thrilled at the idea, but decided that she simply didn't have time to write it herself. So she discussed her decision with me, and we decided that there might be a way around the problem.
And what conclusion was reached?
That I should, in my spare time, research and write the first draft, that Jean would then revise it and add her own personal touches, and that the revised manuscript would then be sent off to the publisher.
Now, was there any agreement about giving you a credit for your work?
Jean had always said that in view of my work on both the program and on the book, that I would receive a proper credit at last. The title page was to read Harte to Harte by Jean Fraser, subtitled My Life in Radio, and in smaller print below, with Annette Sanderson.
Was there any written agreement about this?
No, I thought we trusted one another.
But at no time prior to publication did Miss Fraser allow you to see the introductory pages to the book?
No, she just kept smiling and hinting how pleased I would be.
Well, your work was acknowledged, was it not?
Acknowledged. This book is dedicated with affection and gratitude to Bob, Mick, Shirley, Eddie, Wendy, and Annette for their unending support and love. Last of 6. And what about the title page? A sole writing credit, Harte to Harte by Jean Fraser. Not a word about me, even though I'd written the book.
Miss Sanderson, did you take any positive steps to rectify your claim to a co-writing credit?
I didn't turn up for work the next day. I went to London and saw the editor who'd been responsible for the whole publishing deal.
Did he acknowledge your claim to a co-writing credit and take steps to see that you get some acknowledgement?
No. What he said was something like, I've always understood from Miss Fraser that owing to your valued part in the creation of this book, that your work would be acknowledged as it is, as it has been done, in print, in the book. It wasn't his fault. He was being conned by her, just as I was, just as everyone is.
Miss Anderson, did you approach the plaintiff with your dissatisfaction over the loss of your writing credit?
When I got back from London, I called Jean at the studio. I said, "You bitch. You conniving bitch. How can you do this to me?"
And then?
An hour later, she was at my flat.
Now, what time of night would this have been?
I don't know, about 10:30. I was feeling so low, I'd drunk far too much whiskey and taken a sleeping tablet and crawled off to bed.
And then Miss Fraser arrived.
She was sobbing. Said she couldn't understand what had provoked such an outburst. There was a hell of a row. I told her to get out and I crawled off back to bed again.
So matters were left unresolved?
No. I heard Jean coming into my bedroom. She slipped into bed beside me. She was naked. She was trying to soothe and comfort me. She was kissing me and telling me that I meant more to her than anyone else in the whole world. She clung to me and she made love to me.
You are saying that she made love to you in an effort to distract you from your main purpose.
I'm trying to tell you that Jean is all things to all people. She has power over people. I don't know what it is, sexual, emotional, but when she turns it on, she's irresistible. That night she was so beautiful. She was so loving. She got me so worked up and hysterical that I couldn't deny her anything.
Now, after the events of that evening, was anything practical decided about your omission from the title pages of the book?
At breakfast the following morning, Jean agreed that I would receive 20% of all profits from the book, and that she would see to it that I got to take an active part in the Harte to Harte program myself.
And were these promises fulfilled?
In the end, they were.
And how long did this state of affairs continue, with yourself and Miss Fraser working in harness on the Harte to Harte program?
Until last year.
What happened then?
As everyone here must know, Harte to Harte became the biggest in-depth chat show in the country with a radio audience of millions. Jean became a national figure, a demi-goddess. The whole thing became so sacred that the managing director of General Radio Communications became terrified in case the least breath of scandal were attached to it. So they inserted a morals clause into our contracts.
What was the nature of this morals clause?
In effect, that anyone working on the show who infringed the entrenched establishment attitude towards sexual and social morals during the run of the show would be dismissed forthwith, without appeal or recourse to arbitration.
And how did this clause affect your relationship with Miss Fraser?
When Jean signed that clause, she'd been married for almost a year to Gregory Allardyce, so she was doubly open to any sort of scandal, as high priestess of the holy show in town, and as a married woman.
Was there anything that might cause any scandal to attach itself to Miss Fraser?
Shortly after the morals clause affair, Jean was approached very privately by Edric van der Andel, a big wheel in a large American network company. He wanted to do business with Jean, and she very much wanted to do business with him.
He wanted her to run a similar show for his company.
That's correct, but on a major American television network. He came to London. He seemed impressed, so Jean arranged with me to reserve for her a suite next to Van der Andel at the London Hotel Frobisher.
And?
The three of us had cocktails in Jean's suite, It became very obvious that he was merely doing the boring old male bit. He wanted Jean, and if he couldn't have her, she wouldn't get the offer. He went to his suite.
Yes, at what time of night would this be?
At about 7 in the evening.
But you told the court that this was Mr. Van der Rendel's last day in London.
I'm sorry, I should have said his last full day. He was returning to New York the following morning. I left and went to stay at a friend's flat. The following morning, Jean was frantic with excitement. She was holding up a letter of agreement from Van der Rendel. I asked her how the evening had gone. She said it had been unbelievably tedious, and what had made it even more tedious was that Van had been inadequate in bed.
Yes, what happened in July of last year?
I'd been having a relationship with a married colleague, and as a result of the morals clause, I was dismissed by GRC.
What was your reaction to this?
I decided to get out of town for a while, but I felt I had to see Jean to say goodbye. So I went round to her flat the following evening. Jean wasn't in, but her husband was.
He knew that you'd been dismissed?
He was very upset. He invited me in and we had a drink, and that is when he told me that he was deeply worried about Jean.
In what way?
He felt that she'd been overworking, under too much stress. Apparently she'd become very tense at home,
my
and that was when...
Yes, just one moment, please. Miss Sanderson, are you intending to relate something that Mr. Allardyce told you that Mrs. Allardyce told him?
Naturally, because it was what she said.
Yes, but you were not present at these discussions, were you?
No, but
But this is hearsay evidence and cannot be admitted.
But the whole point
Miss
is... what-
Sanderson, I'm sure you understand what I've said. Carry on, Mr. O'Connor.
Sorry.
We've come to the crucial point in your relationship with Jean Fraser, Miss Sanderson. How did you think word of your affair with a married man had got to the management of GRC?
I assumed, until I spoke with Mr. Allardyce, that any one of several people who knew of the affair could have betrayed us.
Did Miss Fraser know of the affair?
Yes, of course, she was my closest friend.
But did she ever, at any time, tell you that unless you discontinued the affair, she would have to inform on you?
No, never, not at any time.
So of the 5 or 6 people that knew of your affair, you did not think that Miss Fraser would be the one to inform on you?
That is what I assumed, until I spoke with Mr. Allardyce.
Yes, and as a result of what Mr. Allardyce told you, what did you do?
I went back to my flat and tried to kill myself.
How?
Whiskey and sleeping pills. Just made me very, very sick. I drank black coffee and I walked around until dawn. And somehow I got myself into my car and I drove to Oxfordshire.
Why to Oxfordshire?
I needed peace and the company of somebody I could trust. My godmother lives in Stoke Ashley, so I went to see her.
Yes, now what day would that have been?
July the 15th.
What happened 2 days after that, on the 17th of July?
Jean came to see me.
Exactly when?
The afternoon. She arrived about 2 and left shortly after 3:30.
What occurred during that meeting?
Jean admitted to having me sacked. Said she realized that my loss of income and work must have come as a terrible blow, even though I had courted disaster. I told her that she had courted disaster by seducing Van der Rendel. She wanted that kept very quiet. I asked her how she expected me to keep quiet after the way she had behaved. She then offered me £5,000 to keep my mouth shut.
£5,000?
In cash.
And how did you respond to this offer?
I cried. Because of all the things she'd ever done to me, this was the most contemptible. And when she brought that fat envelope out of her handbag and told me it contained £5,000, I wanted to kill her. How easy did she think I was?
Did you accept the cash?
I took the money, and once again, Jean assumed she had bought me off.
Miss Anderson, the £5,000, what has happened to it?
When this trial is over, no matter what the outcome, my solicitor will return the money to Miss Fraser.
Now, Miss Anderson, I want you to think very carefully before you reply. You must realize that if this case should go against you, the costs and damages awarded against you could be very considerable. Are you prepared to abandon your defense and apologize.
I'd sooner go to jail for 20 years than take back one word of what I've written about her.
Miss Sanderson, you realize, of course, that this is a civil case and that there isn't the slightest likelihood of you going to prison for 20 minutes, let alone 20 years. Your first allegation is concerned with events that occurred at General Radio Communications in June of 1975. Now, Miss Fraser, out of the goodness of her heart, wished to make use of your training and talents by getting you a job as a researcher on her then program.
That is so, yes.
Now, you've told the court that there were problems here and that Miss Fraser charmed the pants of the personnel manager, Mr. Farling, in order to secure the job for you.
Yes.
Yes. Now, when pressed by his lordship to define what charming the pants of Mr. Farling meant, you alleged that sexual intercourse between Miss Fraser and Mr. Farling did not take place.
But the sexual intimacy did.
Oh, yes, sexual intimacy. What a world of lubricity is conjured up by that phrase. Now, what does it actually mean? Cannot sexual intimacy be a meeting of the eyes, a certain smile, a movement of the lips? Does sexual intimacy have to have a basis in squalid physical encounters?
What Jean told me left me in no doubt that an overt sexual act had taken place.
What kind of an overt sexual act?
My lord, I have no intention of saying in open court what Miss Fraser told me took place between herself and Ned Farling.
My lord?
Then she'll write it down.
If I must.
I'm afraid you must, Miss Sanderson, if you intend pursuing this allegation. Yes. Yes, I see.
Do you claim to be present when this alleged activity took place?
Of course I wasn't.
You've alleged that the words you've written down were the words Miss Fraser used to describe how she dealt with Mr. Farling.
Well, they're not the kind of words I dream up, are they?
Dream up, Miss Sanderson. Mr. Farling died last month of a cerebral hemorrhage. How can I possibly know what you are capable of dreaming up? You are the writer of fiction, Miss Sanderson, not I.
The case of Allardyce against Sanderson will be continued tomorrow in the Crown Court. Today at Fulchester High Court, Annette Sanderson is accused of the malicious libel of her former boss, radio producer Jean Fraser Allardyce, following the publication of a short story. A story which was a thinly veiled account of her professional and private association with Mrs. Allardyce. This is the defendant's second day in the witness box, where she is being cross-examined by counsel for the plaintiff. The case you are about to see and the characters in it are fictional. The procedure, however, is legally accurate. The characters are played by actors, but the jury is selected from members of the general public.
Now, Miss Sanderson, amongst a miasma of minor allegations in your short story, one major allegation begins to rear its head above the swamp. That in order to ensure that the new program, Harte to Harte, would be officially blessed, Miss Fraser seduced the managing director of General Radio Communications, Mr. Eddie Wilbraham. Did you ever hear my client promise Mr. Wilbraham a sexual favors in return for his go-ahead on the program?
No.
The next allegation concerns the program dealing with lesbianism. You've told the court that Miss Fraser substituted two carefully rehearsed actresses for the lesbian pair you had chosen, and that she packed you off to Carlisle. Now, did Jean Fraser at any time say that these two women were actresses?
She didn't have to. It was obvious.
Yet, will you please answer my questions directly? Did you make any attempt to track them down and to confess to their part in this alleged misrepresentation.
What was the point? It was all far too late by then.
What was the point, indeed? Yet despite all this, you remained in Jean Fraser's employment.
She was my friend. I loved and admired her ability. I couldn't see it wrecked when we'd come so far.
Your humanity and your compassion and your enthusiasm triumphed over your moral scruples. Now we come to the question of Miss Fraser's professional autobiography. You've alleged that you wrote most of the book on the understanding that Miss Fraser would give you a co-writing credit. Was there any legal agreement as to this between you?
No. I thought we trusted one another. I always thought that my work would be properly acknowledged.
Yes, as it was. In a loving and generous dedication.
Last of 6. Is that a generous writing credit?
Credit where credit was due, perhaps. Now we arrive next at the alleged adulterous liaison between the American television director, Mr. Edric Van der Rendel. You've testified that from 7 in the evening until breakfast time the following morning, you were absent from the hotel in which this alleged liaison took place.
I was staying with friends.
Yes, and we only have your word for it that this alleged liaison did take place.
Jean told me about it.
You've also said that my client betrayed you to General Radio Communications. Did you or did you not fornicate with a married man associated with that program?
We were having an affair.
Was not your
yes.
affair not common knowledge amongst at least 5 people, as well as my client?
Yes.
Of course it was. Now finally, you've alleged that Miss Fraser came to see you in Oxfordshire on July the 17th.
She did come to see me.
Did anyone else see Miss Fraser arrive at or leave your godmother's house?
No, my godmother had gone to see friends in Bicester.
So we only have your word for it that Miss Fraser did in fact visit you there.
And £5,000.
But you will hear my client deny ever having visited you in Oxfordshire. And there are no witnesses to testify to the truth of that statement. I put it to you that your testimony as to that meeting and that grotesque offer of £5,000 in cash is on a par with everything else that you've suggested in this court. I suggest your testimony is nothing but a vicious fiction, a hazy scenario of sleeping tablets, alcohol, depression, sexual fantasy, and the delusion of your own literary worth. And I have no further questions to put to you.
Mr. Anderson, my learned friend has shouted and stormed in an attempt to get you to shift your ground. Do you still maintain that all your allegations are true?
As I stand here on oath, everything I have testified to is true.
Does your lordship have any questions?
No, Mr. O'Connor. You may leave the witness box.
My lord, I have a further witness. Unfortunately, owing to a train derailment, she is delayed. I would like permission to call her later.
Any objections, Mr. Wolfe?
Oh, no, my lord.
Very well. Perhaps you would continue, Mr. Wolfe.
Mrs. Allardyce, your full name is Jean Fraser Allardyce, is that right?
Yes.
But professionally, however, you are better known by your maiden name, Jean Fraser.
Yes, most people know me as Jean Fraser.
Yes, Miss Fraser, you've read the defendant's short story entitled Your Head on My Shoulder. The defendant concedes that it contains several specific allegations concerning your moral and professional behavior. Now, in the light of all this, have you any wish to reconsider your action of libel against her?
The defendant, Miss Sanderson, whom until recently I thought of as my closest friend, has done so much damage, caused so much unhappiness to my husband, to me, and to so many of our friends, that until all our names are cleared in public, there can be no rest for any of us. I feel deeply sorry for Miss Sanderson, because when all this is over and her story has been discredited, what kind of life can she expect to lead?
Quite, Miss Fraser. Now, I'd like to deal with the defendant's allegations as far as possible in chronological order. Now, firstly, then, the matter of her needing the position of researcher to work on your program. Miss Sanderson has alleged that you charmed the pants of the then personnel manager in order to gain his approval for Miss Sanderson's appointment.
I could see that Annette was a very bright girl and could do far better than acting as a receptionist. I therefore went to see the local personnel manager, Mr. The late Mr. Ned Farling.
Yes, do you recall where this meeting took place?
In Ned's office.
And did you exert any sexual pressure in order to obtain Mr. Farling's agreement?
Of course I didn't. Do I exert sexual pressure over the lift operator when I ask him to take me to the 5th floor? It's a nonsense.
Yeah, so that there was never anything immodest or improper in your relationship with Mr. Farling?
No.
Now, Miss Fraser, in August of 1976, you offered the defendant accommodation in your house. Why was that?
Well, the place she was living in was dreadful. We both had far too much work on hand to be distracted by Annette's having to flat hunt. So I invited her to stay in my house.
And it was whilst Miss Sanderson was living at your home in September of 1976 that the idea of the special program, Harte to Harte, was suggested.
About then, yes.
Yes, who conceived the idea of the program?
I did.
You've heard the defendant claim that it was she who originated the idea.
I'm quite prepared to give credit where it's due. Once she had read my notes on the proposed series, it was Annette who came up with the title, Harte to Harte. And she worked very hard once we had the go-ahead to make the show a success. But the original concept was mine. I had created and presented dozens of programs before Annette joined us.
Yes, I see. Now, this matter of the go-ahead for the series is of vital importance to this case. The defendant has alleged you invited Mr. Eddie Wilbraham, the General Radio Communications Managing Director, round to your home, and in your room, on at least 4 occasions, you made love to him.
The trouble with Annette was she would never seem able to have a successful relationship of her own, so she fantasized about everyone she knew.
Miss Fraser, just answer the question, will you?
I'm sorry, my lord. Eddie came round to visit me one evening on his own. That was the evening on which the program had been given the go-ahead a few hours earlier.
Yes, were you alone when he called?
Yes.
At what time of night would this have been?
About 9:30.
About 9:30. Now, why are you so sure?
Well, because it was the turning point in my career. True to his word, Eddie came round to see me in person to tell me the good news. The show had been accepted. Shortly after 10, Annette arrived with a few friends. We told her the good news and she was overjoyed. There were general congratulations. But because the other people weren't in the business and Eddie wanted to tell me more about the meeting, we went upstairs to my study to have a good old chinwag.
And how long did that chinwag go on?
Oh, we chatted away and had a few drinks and Eddie left around midnight.
Now, did you, at any time during those 2 hours, take Mr. Wilbraham into your bed as a reward for his endeavors on your behalf?
Of course not. These awful accusations are wounding and hurtful to us all.
Yes, indeed. Now, did Mr. Wilbraham ever visit your home subsequent to that evening?
A few times, yes. I quite frequently give dinner parties, and they sometimes included Eddie and his wife.
And his wife. But did Mr. Wilbraham at any time visit your room late at night, enjoy your favors, then creep downstairs and give Miss Sanderson a blow-by-blow account of the fun?
Never. The idea is squalid and disgusting.
You're lying, Jean, you're lying.
We now progress to one of the most serious allegations that the defendant has made against you. She's alleged that on the day the program dealing with lesbianism was to be recorded, you sent her up to Carlisle. Is that correct?
I asked her to go to Carlisle. We were in grave danger of not having enough material for the next show if something wasn't done very quickly. She was disappointed, naturally, as I was for her. But there was no option.
The defendant then alleges that once she was out of the way, you dropped the original lesbian couple and that you substituted 2, and I quote her words, 2 unknown heterosexual and talented actresses to represent practicing lesbians.
Annette has deliberately chosen to ignore the facts. Just before noon, on the day of the recording, the 2 women who'd agreed to speak as the lesbian pair changed their minds. I had 3 hours in which to find adequate substitutes. We'd contacted 6 lesbian couples in all, and I had to find and locate a pair I could bring to the studio in time for the recording. The nearest couple lived on the outskirts of Fulchester. I rang them, and they agreed to take part.
And were these ladies heterosexual and talented actresses?
They were rather sad young women living on the fringe of what they thought of as show business.
But were they practicing lesbians, living together?
Yes, of course they were. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been on the shortlist for the program.
So why was Miss Sanderson so enraged when she heard the playback of the program in your office? A program that, by general consensus, was agreed to be effective and moving.
I wish I knew. I can only think she was so upset because the first couple, on whom she'd spent so much time, had let us down so badly.
Did she accuse you at any time of employing professional actresses?
Oh, yes. In my office, she was weeping and hysterical. I couldn't believe that she would think I was so stupid as to risk the integrity of my program in that way.
Now, the defendant has alleged that your next contretemps was to do with the writing credits on your book, your professional autobiography entitled, like your show, Harte to Harte. What was the nature of your working relationship?
We came up with a deal. I would make sound recordings of my professional life. Annette would transcribe them and come to me about anything she thought I'd left out. For this, I would pay her £1,000 and 20% of all authors' royalties.
Now, did you at any time promise the defendant a co-writing credit on this book?
Never.
But you nevertheless wished to acknowledge the defendant's help in the preparation of this book.
Naturally, but I wanted it to be a surprise.
Now, the defendant has claimed that following her visit to the publishing house, she returned to her flat, then rang you at the studio.
That's true. She called me a conniving bitch and rang off.
And how did you respond to this extraordinary attack?
I was astonished and worried for her. I went to see her immediately.
Now, the defendant has claimed that when you arrived at her flat, you were sobbing and moaning and that there was a dreadful scene.
The reverse is true. She was in a terrible state. She had some coffee, and then she went to bed after having taken a sedative.
A sedative. She went to bed alone?
Yes. After about half an hour, I looked in. She was sleeping soundly, so I switched off the lights and went home.
So you didn't get into bed with her?
At no time. I'd been working very hard all day, and I wanted to go home.
And at no time did you make sexual advances of any sort to her?
How often do we have to go through this? At no time, then or any other time.
Thank you, that's perfectly clear. Well, now, next on Miss Sanderson's remarkable list of allegations comes the one dealing with your relationship with Mr. Edric van der Rendal.
Her inventiveness is remarkable.
You don't deny that you took a suite at Frobisher's Hotel in London where Mr. van der Rendal was staying?
Of course not. Mr. van der Rendal had been playing hot and cold. Annette and I wanted a definite decision before he left. The right decision could have made a momentous change in our careers.
Then the three of you had drinks in your suite and Miss Sanderson left the hotel?
Yes, after Mr. van der Rendal had left, not before.
Did you see Mr. van der Rendal again that evening?
Yes, we had dinner together.
Oh, where?
In the grill room, together with about 40 other diners. Over the coffee, he said he felt sure the program would be a success on television over there and gave me a signed letter of agreement.
So he must have signed it before you sat down to dinner together?
Certainly. We said good night, and that was that.
Thank you. You've been very patient. Now, in July of last year, the defendant was dismissed from her post with the Harte to Harte program because she had infringed a morals clause in her contract.
Yes.
Were you responsible for engineering her dismissal?
Of course not. I did everything I could to get her reinstated.
Had the defendant discussed her affair with you, the affair that led to her dismissal?
Certainly.
And at no time did you reveal to upper management that this liaison was taking place?
Well, the last thing I wanted was for it to be found out. I was expecting Annette to go to America with me.
Indeed you were. Now then, the defendant was dismissed from GRC on the 13th of July last. When did you next see her?
The day I entered this courtroom.
The defendant has alleged that on the 17th of July last you visited her in Oxfordshire and attempted to bribe her with £5,000 in cash.
This is simply the craziest allegation in a list of crazy allegations. Because on July the 17th, When Annette alleges I was with her in Oxfordshire, I was, in fact, conducting research in Norfolk.
You were in Norfolk?
Yes, I arrived at Thetford in time for lunch.
Were you on your own?
Yes.
Was that usual?
Not unusual. That day I wanted to be on my own. There'd been a distressing few days with Annette's dismissal, and I wanted to have time to relax. I relax best when I'm driving alone.
Now, at this hotel in Thetford, were you recognized by anyone?
By several people, yes. My picture was plastered all over the papers every time Harte to Harte was mentioned. They wanted to discuss the show and get my autograph.
So you talked to a number of people and then you had your lunch. Did you interview anyone in the end?
No, I didn't feel up to any extra motoring, so I drove straight back home.
At what time did your lunch end?
Oh, I arrived late, so I must have left around 3.
Around 3. Yet the defendant has alleged that you arrived in Oxfordshire at her godmother's home around 2 that afternoon.
That's nonsense.
You did, Jean, you did.
I won't put up with any more of these outbursts, Miss Sanderson. Do you understand that? Any more behavior of this nature and you'll be removed from the court.
My lord, so you left Thetford at about 3 in the afternoon and drove straight back to Fulchester, a distance of some 140 miles, across country and slow.
Oh, my lord, really?
Oh, I've made that journey myself several times, Mr. O'Connor. It is cross-country and very slow if you drive with caution.
I'm obliged to you, my lord. So you arrived home about when?
About 7:30.
Thank you. Now, did you at any time withdraw £5,000 from your bank account in order to bribe the defendant to keep her mouth shut about what she alleges were your indiscretions with Mr. Van der Endel?
You've seen my bank statements for that entire year. In any case, I had no indiscretions to worry about.
Thank you, Miss Fraser.
Mr. O'Connor, oh, and please make it brief. This case has taken a great deal of time already.
Oh, yes, my lord. Miss Fraser, let me take you back to the evening when you entertained Mr. Wilbraham, the managing director of GRC, in your bedroom.
In my study.
Well, the room contained a bed, didn't it?
A divan.
Oh, very well, a divan, in which you slept every night you were at home.
Yes, of course.
Well, in 2 hours, it would have been perfectly feasible, would it not, for you and Mr. Wilbraham to have spent all that time in bed, in comfort, making love without fear of interruption.
It didn't happen.
It would have been perfectly feasible for you and Mr. Wilbraham to have spent all your time in bed without fear of interruption.
Yes.
Thank you. Now, in the matter of the debatable co-authorship rights to the book entitled Harte to Harte, would it have been possible at any time prior to the publisher's acceptance of the manuscript for you to have promised Miss Sanderson co-writing credits?
But I didn't.
Miss
I've already
Fraser,
made that quite
could it have been possible for you to have done, in the absence of anything to that effect in writing?
Yes. Anything's possible.
Thank you for both admissions. So it could have been equally possible for you to have decided to soup up this lesbian program by rejecting 2 indifferent speakers and to hire and rehearse 2 actresses to represent the couple of lesbians.
It didn't happen like that.
Miss Fraser.
Yes. It could have been possible.
Thank you. I should like now to move on to the night in London with Mr. Van der Endel. Between 7 that night and, shall we say, 6 the next morning, would it have been possible, dinner accepted, for you and Mr. Van der Endel to have spent all that time together and in bed?
Everyone seems to be sex mad.
Just answer my question, Miss Fraser. Would you like me to repeat it?
It would have been possible. It would have been equally possible.
Thank you, Miss Fraser. It would have been perfectly possible.
This is not justice. It's a travesty.
Miss Fraser, however disturbed you may feel, you must realize that your counsel has had and will have every opportunity of presenting your case to the court. Now, please confine yourself to answering counsel's questions.
I'm very sorry, my lord.
Miss Fraser, shall we consider the matter of Miss Sanderson's dismissal from General Radio Communications? When she persisted with this dangerous relationship, didn't you begin to fear for the good name of your program?
No.
Well, why not?
I was far more concerned with Annette's happiness.
Were you indeed? I put it to you that you were so fearful for the good name of your program that you went to the management and you told them that it was impossible for you to carry on working with two members of your team who were flagrantly committing adultery.
I did nothing of the sort.
But you could have done.
My lord, I'm getting very tired of this unwarranted sniping.
You confine yourself to answering counsel's questions and it'll be over all the sooner.
Thank you, my lord. Miss Fraser, you could very easily have gone to the management.
Yes. I could have done, but I didn't.
You could have done very easily. Now, Miss Sanderson has told the court that following her discovery responsible for her at her godmother's home on the 17th of July last.
It's a pack of lies. It's absurd.
Well, that's for the jury. Now, you've told us that you drove all the way to Thetford. You interviewed no one. You had lunch on your own. You drove all the way home again. Do you really expect us to believe that? Now, it's a matter of the £5,000 cash.
You have seen my bank statements.
Oh, yes. Cash withdrawals for the year ended on your visit to Miss Sanderson. They amounted to £9,200. Well, easy enough to set aside a mere £5,000 of that for any eventuality that might occur.
Why are you twisting my life?
It would have been very possible for you to have set aside £5,000 of those cash withdrawals, wouldn't it? Well, wouldn't it?
I can give you an itemized breakdown of what that cash was spent on.
So you contend it would have been quite out of the question for you, with your annual income of around £18,000 a year and your husband's salary of £15,000 a year, to have set aside a mere £5,000.
Do you wish to see the records?
Well, if you and your husband, with a joint income of £33,000 a year, could find no means of saving £5,000, then how could the defendant, with a mere income of £4,500, hope to amass that sum in cash? But she has. And she's prepared to hand it to you today.
The case of Allardyce against Sanderson will be concluded tomorrow in the Crown Court. The trial is in its third day, and Mr. Edric van der Rendel, an American television producer, is being examined by counsel for the plaintiff.
Mr. van der Rendel, have you come to this court willingly?
I wanted to come. I had to come here to help secure the reputation of a good woman, fine woman.
You are all too familiar, I imagine, with the events that took place at Frobisher's Hotel on the evening of 17th of June last.
Sir, I'm well aware of the poisonous accusations that have been leveled at Miss Fraser and myself, and I'm here to refute those accusations absolutely.
I think it would be advisable for you to allow Mr. Wolfe to present those refutations, Mr. van der Rendel.
What's that, sir? Oh, fine. Just so long as he does.
Mr. van der Rendel, would it be true to say that prior to your meeting with Miss Fraser and Miss Sanderson in Miss Fraser's suite at Frobisher's, you were not entirely certain that the program Harte to Harte would be an unqualified success in America?
At that particular moment in time, I had certain reservations as to how the program would translate from radio to the television medium. So I asked to meet with Miss Fraser to continue a number of lines of thought.
And that meeting took place in her suite?
Yes, well, the lady has the first call.
But Miss Sanderson was present during those discussions?
Yes, sir, she was.
You left the suite before Miss Sanderson did?
That's correct.
What was the final outcome of that meeting?
Well, I told Miss Fraser that any reservations that I might have had were dispelled by our frank and wide-ranging discussion. And as far as I was concerned, the whole deal for a television show was in the bag.
And you said this in the presence of Miss Sanderson?
Right, yes. In fact, she opened another bottle of bourbon so we could drink to it.
I see. And having left the suite to the two ladies, when was your next meeting with Miss Fraser?
Well, I went to my room, showered and changed, and then I telephoned through to Miss Fraser, suggesting that we have dinner together, since that was my last night in town.
And where did you meet Miss Fraser?
In one of the public restaurants, the grill room.
And you had dinner there together?
Yes, that's correct.
When that dinner was over, what happened?
What happened? Well, I went to my room and I slept. I had to get up at some god-awful hour the next morning.
So that subsequent to that dinner, you did not see Miss Fraser again?
No, sir.
Thank you. Now, apart from your determination to clear Miss Fraser's name, was there any other reason why you flew to England yesterday?
There surely was. I brought with me a contract for Miss Fraser's services for an initial run of 13 television presentations of Harte to Harte in the United States of America.
Thank you. I have no further questions, my lord.
Mr. Van der Rendel, would you describe yourself as a man of the world?
Well, I hope so, sir. I've been around the world long enough.
Thank you. And as a man of the world, would you say that at any one time in hotels throughout the world there are men of power and wealth staying alone in their hotel rooms under the pressure of business?
Sure there are.
And these men, do they ever become lonely?
Some may. Why?
And when they're lonely, do they seek out the companionship of a female?
I guess it's possible.
Well, you were alone between marriages when the meetings with Miss Fraser took place.
I was, but
You were alone and fancy-free. Would you look at the plaintiff, please?
Sir?
Miss Fraser. Do you regard her as an attractive woman?
Miss Fraser is a fine and wonderful human being.
But would you, as a well-experienced and travelled man of the world, regard her as sexually desirable?
Oh, Lord, this is the most unsavoury line of question.
You chose to call this witness, Mr. Wolfe. I consider the question perfectly proper in the circumstances of the case. Mr. Van der Rendel, you'll answer counsel's question.
My question is quite simple. Do you find Miss Fraser sexually desirable?
Miss Fraser is a very attractive woman. Not that I ever thought of her in that way.
You didn't? Now you've agreed that you went to your room just after 10 on the night in question. How much had you drunk prior to going to your room?
What's that?
You spoke earlier of another bottle of bourbon being open. Well, that must have been before 7:30. You've told us that you and Miss Fraser had dinner together. Presumably, as a man of the world, you ordered a good bottle of wine.
Well, I believe I may have done, yes.
And liqueurs with your coffee? Mr. Van der Rendel?
I don't recall if we had liqueurs or not.
Well, may I set the scene? You've drunk a great deal of bourbon earlier in the evening. You've had introductory drinks to dinner. You've had a good bottle of wine with the meal. You've had a snifter or two of brandy afterwards. You're mellow and relaxed. You're sitting opposite a voluptuous and desirable woman. You both have no further claims on yourselves all night. I put it to you that as an experienced man of the world, you'd have no difficulty at all in inviting that woman to your bed.
Sir, I deeply resent...
It would have been a perfectly normal thing for you to have done, to have gone to bed with Miss Fraser that night.
Sir,
Please answer counsel's question.
possible, yes. In fact, no. I have far too high regard for Miss Fraser's integrity.
Do you always have such a high regard for a woman's integrity?
I beg your pardon, sir.
Well, how many times have you been married?
Oh, my lord, this can have no bearing upon this present case whatsoever.
Mr. Wolfe, you must have fully anticipated this line of cross-examination long before you ever decided to call the witness. Mr. O'Connor, carry on.
How many times have you been married, Mr. Van der Rendel? Well, I assume you're a numerate man.
4 times.
All those marriages, they ended in divorce. Would you care to tell the court the grounds for those divorces? Well, allow me to remind you. All 4 were obtained by your then wife. The first was on the ground of mental cruelty, the second, third and fourth on the grounds of adultery. Mr. Van der Rendel, as a man of the world, will you tell the court who in America, in the world of television, is universally acclaimed as the Ram of Lexington Avenue? Silence is surely golden, Mr. Van der Rendel. You do not dispute that it is you. Oh, one final question. My learned friend elicited from you earlier that you came over here to deliver to Miss Fraser, amongst other things, a contract for a run of 13 programs of her show in America on television.
That's absolutely right.
Yes, well, has that contract been signed by your sponsors yet? Or are they not awaiting with great eagerness to see if Miss Fraser is vindicated first.
Mr. Wilbraham, you were managing director of General Radio Communications at the time when Miss Fraser offered you her idea for the series Harte to Harte.
That's correct.
You will recall the day your planning committee met to make decisions about the new season's shows, shows that might include that program, Harte to Harte.
I remember it very clearly.
Now, when that meeting was over, what did you do?
I went to see Miss Fraser at her home at around 9:30 that evening to let her know in detail how that meeting had gone.
And where did you talk to her?
Well, because of the presence of a number of young people unconnected with radio, we went to her study.
When did you leave?
I left around midnight.
Was the program already accepted when you met?
Oh, yes, that's why we had a lot to talk about. Who was to be in the new team, exactly how it was to evolve, the nature of the ideas that were to be explored. We had a great deal to talk about that evening.
And you drank as you talked?
Well, not much. I had a headache. Jean had some sherry. That's all she ever had in her study, as far as I know. I had a glass for appearance's sake.
Yes, so with so much to discuss and a nagging headache, were you in a mood for a strenuous bout of love-making?
You must be joking. Besides, my wife was expecting me back. I didn't want to be too late.
Can you recall exactly the way you left Miss Fraser?
Well, as far as I remember, she saw me to the door, the front door of the house, that is. I gave her a quick peck on the cheek par for the course and nipped off home in the old motor.
So, en route to the hall door, you came downstairs and through Miss Fraser's ground floor living area?
Yes.
Was the defendant there?
Annette? Oh, no, the house was in darkness until Jean switched on the light. Annette must have been sound asleep by then.
So, you did not see her before you went home?
No.
No. So, by no stretch of the imagination, could you have recounted to the defendant your frenzied night of love with Miss Fraser?
Well, that idea is just sick, isn't it?
Did you, before or after that occasion, make love to Miss Fraser in her home or elsewhere?
With a wife and 2 kids waiting for me? No way.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbraham.
Mr. Wilbraham, you've told the court that on the night in question, when you were alone with Miss Fraser for 2 hours in her bedroom...
Her study.
Her private room. Whilst you were toying with a glass of sherry and passing the time of night, you had a headache.
Yes, well, I had a headache that night.
Well, this is nearly 3 years ago, but you remember having a headache. Can you remember what you were wearing?
This is ridiculous.
When was the next programme planning meeting?
Oh, 2 months after that one?
Did you have a headache after that meeting?
I don't know.
2 months later, 2 months nearer the present time, and you don't remember whether you had a headache or not? Yet you've made a great play of the headache you had on the night in question.
Well, it was a very special night.
The night you made love to Jean Fraser.
Oh, you're drivelling.
Mr. Wilbraham, I will not have anyone in this court abused.
I'm sorry, my lord. I meant it's drivel, that suggestion.
Then choose your words more carefully, Lord.
Now, you've told the court that on the night in question, you gave Miss Fraser a quick peck on the cheek, par for the course, and then nipped off home as the wife was expecting you.
Yes?
You later told the court that you'd never made love to Miss Fraser at any other time, since you had the wife and kids waiting for you.
Well, what's the matter with that?
Oh, they're admirable sentiments, Mr. Wilbraham. I'm only baffled in my mind is how a man of such tender devotion to hearth and home should have separated from that wife and those children within a year of the night in question, on the grounds of your desertion and adultery. That is correct, is it not?
Yes, but it had nothing to do
Mr. Wilbraham, cast your mind back, if you will, to the year immediately prior to that meeting with Miss Fraser. For a man with your remarkable memory, it shouldn't be too difficult to remember how many secretaries left your office, left your employment during that period.
Two, I think.
That remarkable memory is playing you false, isn't it? The number was 4. Would you like me to give you their names?
What is all this about anyway?
Yes, well, that's what I'm trying to determine. Why 4 well-qualified girls should leave your office during that time.
Marriage, better jobs, how should I know?
Yes, wasn't it rather that you couldn't keep your hands off them?
Oh, this is monstrous.
But not an answer.
A married man with 2 children.
Oh, the wife and kids. I've no further questions, my lord.
Mr. Wilbraham, let us satisfy the court on one major detail, this desertion, this adultery. Were they in any way connected with Miss Fraser? Was she cited as co-respondent?
She was most certainly not.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbraham. Unless your lordship has any questions, that concludes the case for the plaintiff.
You may leave the witness box. Mr. O'Connor, you told us earlier that you wished to call a witness for the defendant, that the witness was delayed, and I ruled that under the circumstances she might be called at the end of the trial. Were she able to be here by then? Is your witness now in court?
She is, my lord.
Then let her be called.
I call Aileen Spranger, Derbyshire.
Miss Derbyshire, would you like to sit down?
Thank you, my lord, but I prefer to stand, if I may. I've had a great deal too much sitting down recently.
Mr. O'Connor?
My lord, may I make one observation before this gentleman puts his questions to me?
Please.
When I was approached at my home in Scotland by a solicitor representing the interests of Miss Sanderson, and when I heard the nature of the case in which she was involved, and with whom she was involved, I told the solicitor that I could not and would not associate myself with such a proceeding. I think I made my views very clear indeed. Nevertheless, some days later, the same young man called at my home again and served upon me a subpoena requiring me at law to come to this courtroom and give evidence. And if that is the law, then I regret, my lord, that I find that aspect of it morally most reprehensible. Now that is all that I wish to say on the subject.
Miss Derbyshire, I'm sure that everyone here today can understand and sympathise with your reluctance. But if justice is to be even-handed, it's necessary for witnesses to be called, though it be against their strongest inclinations.
Thank you, my lord.
Mr. O'Connor?
You are Aileen Spranger, Derbyshire, and you live at the Old Manse, Colmaninch in Ross and Cromarty.
Yes?
Between 1939 and 1952, what was your occupation?
I was an assistant headmistress at the Darcy School for Girls in Rutland.
And from 1952 until 1969?
I was headmistress of that school.
Thank you. Now, the plaintiff, Jean Fraser, was a pupil at your school between the ages of 11 and 17, I believe.
She was.
Do you remember her well?
Very well.
Do you recognise her in court?
I'm sorry, my dear.
Miss Derbyshire, why did your pupil, Jean Fraser, leave school before taking her higher school certificate?
She was dismissed at the beginning of the summer term, her final term.
On what grounds?
For unbecoming conduct with another pupil.
Jean Fraser was how old at this time?
Almost 18.
And how old was the other pupil?
13.
18 and 13. Now, Miss Derbyshire, I realise how reluctant you are to give evidence, but you must be aware of the gravity of this case. Who was responsible for calling for Jean Fraser's dismissal from your school?
I was.
Now, did you personally witness the plaintiff in an act of unbecoming conduct with a much younger girl, and she was dismissed as a result?
That is so.
Thank you, Miss Derbyshire.
Miss Derbyshire, you have an excellent memory.
Yes?
Yes, do you recall the name of the younger pupil in that distressing situation?
Very well, but I've no intention of revealing it. That little girl was the victim, not the aggressor, and I will not have her name bandied about in this place.
I see. Very well. That little girl, what became of her after Jean Fraser's dismissal?
She stayed on at the school. As I said, she was the victim. One does not punish victims.
And how long did she stay on?
From my school, she took an open exhibition to Lady Margaret Hall.
Oh, a girl to be proud of.
Certainly.
And do you keep up with many of your former pupils?
We keep up with one another.
And that particular little girl, by now a mature woman, have you kept up with her?
I had a letter from her about 6 months ago.
Oh, doing well, is she?
Very well. She's lecturer in Renaissance literature at an excellent provincial university.
Married?
Yes.
Happily?
Her letters give every impression of happiness.
Children?
2.
In every way, then, a satisfactory citizen, teacher, and mother.
Most certainly.
Yes, despite the fact that she had engaged in what you've alleged to be unbecoming conduct with the plaintiff. Her career, her private life were in no way harmed by that encounter. It must have been quite trivial, must it not?
There was nothing trivial about that relationship. Had it gone undetected, I cannot begin to estimate what lasting harm it might have done to both girls.
Yes, but the words morality and immorality have very different meanings to different generations, Miss Derbyshire. Now, since the time when Jean Fraser was dismissed from your school, the law itself has been altered radically in relation to many aspects of homosexuality.
Jean was attempting to corrupt and influence a much younger girl, a girl who had not the power to protect herself or to differentiate between affection and desire. Jean, 18 years of age, possessed that discernment. I shall say no more than that.
Now, in your 17 years as headmistress, how many times have you felt obliged to expel girls from your school for what you have termed unbecoming conduct?
Twice only. Jean was the second and the very last.
Does that mean you took a more lenient view thereafter?
It means that thereafter no such conduct took place within my school.
That you are aware of?
That I, or my staff, or the prefects were aware of.
Miss Derbyshire, when you have two warm-hearted people thrown together, perhaps lonely, perhaps distressed, is it not difficult to differentiate between affection and desire, especially in the case of young girls who are by nature affectionate and demonstrative with one another?
There is always a distinction between affection and desire.
So you would hold to the one and despise the other. You would applaud affection and punish desire.
I may be 80 years of age, young man, but I know a casuist when I hear one, and all your questions have been top-heavy with casuistry.
Yes, well, I put it to you, Miss Derbyshire, that your concern for the moral welfare of your school and the strict code of conduct you enforced there, that you severely punished a girl for what could have been no more than a thoughtless and slight display of tenderness.
You're still trifling with words, Mr. Forgive me, I didn't catch your name.
Wolfe.
Thank you. In order to settle this matter once and for all, may I put to you certain questions?
Miss Derbyshire, as much as I admire your concern to settle the matter, this examination has been going on for quite some time, and you yourself were at great pains to tell me that you wanted it to be brief.
Thank you, my lord. Then I shall try to give an answer. If you are married and you have a male friend who is fond of your wife, that is one thing. But if that friend's fondness develops into desire, and that desire is gratified, will he still be your friend?
Well, Mr. Wolfe?
Oh, thank you, Miss Derbyshire. I have to say, I have no further questions, my lord.
Do you wish to re-examine, Mr. O'Connor?
Thank you, my lord. Miss Derbyshire, I have no wish to distress you further, but the court must be left in no doubt, after the casuistry of the past few minutes. Did you see Jean Fraser in an act of lesbian seduction with a much younger girl?
I did, and that is my last word on the matter. And I wish to go.
Very well, Miss Derbyshire. We appreciate very much your having come down here, and we hope that your return journey to Scotland will be less arduous than the one here. You may leave the witness box.
Thank you, my lord.
My lord, that concludes the case for the defendant.
And finally, members of the jury, with a charge of malicious libel where the defendant admits the publication of defamatory allegations against another, but claims them to be true, then it is with the defendant that the burden of proof lies. The plaintiff is not bound to prove her innocence of the accusations laid. The defendant must prove to your satisfaction that it is more probable than not that the allegations are substantially true. Now, if you find for the plaintiff, you must remember what I've previously said on the question of damages. Will you now retire, elect a foreman, and consider your verdict?
Members of the jury, will your foreman please stand? Now, just answer this question, yes or no. Have you reached a verdict on which you're all agreed?
Yes.
Do you find for the plaintiff, Jean Fraser Allardyce, or for the defendant, Annette Sanderson?
For the defendant.
When our cameras return to watch another case in the Crown Court.